This Late Night Linux Family podcast is made possible by our patrons. Go to latenightlinux.com/support for details of how you can join them. Support us on Patreon for access to ad-free episodes and early releases. That's latenightlinux.com/support. 2.5 Admins, episode 274. I'm Joe.
I'm Jim.
And I'm Alan.
And here we are again. Before we get started, your customary Clara article plug, Alan, is Understanding Storage Performance Metrics.
Yeah, in this article, Jim breaks down basically the difference between throughput, latency, and IOPS, and how the three relate to each other.
Right, and you've also got a plug for the December webinar, the 12 Days of ZFS.
Also hosted by Jim. So yes, in December, we'll have our next webinar. That will be on December 10th at 11 a.m. Eastern, and Jim and I will share the 12 days of ZFS with everyone. So if you're interested, definitely come check that out.
Right, well, links in the show notes as usual. Microsoft is turning Windows into an agentic OS, starting with the taskbar. Excellent. Great. Just what we want.
The taskbar seems like the last place I want them to do anything.
Except it actually makes sense to do it that way if you're going to do this. The idea is that it goes right on your taskbar because it's right there front and center. When you tell your idiot what you want it to go and do, then it goes and does it, and you get like a little bit of status information about what your idiot is off going and hopefully doing right there in the taskbar. The thing is, as I read the description of this agentic OS and the idea of having these agents that you fire off from the taskbar and you monitor their progress going and doing things, I'm just reminded of every escort mission I've ever suffered through in a real-time strategy game. And it's like, I could complete this mission so easily if I didn't have to escort the idiot AI. If I could just go and blow the things up or go and run away from the thing or do whatever, not saddled with this cybernetic idiot, I'd be fine. And so I look at these plans to turn Windows into an agentic OS, and I'm like, I understand exactly what they say they're doing, and I want absolutely no part of it.
Yeah, like adding an agent to the taskbar is one thing, but they made it sound more like the taskbar was going to try to apply AI to all my other windows. And I was like, what? Why would you do that? Some of what they're trying to talk about doing, lightning fast search for your files. It's like, well, haven't you been indexing my files forever already? Like, I don't know. I have a good filing system, so I don't generally lose my files and have to search for them. But I understand that's not normal for other people. And like, you can start a conversation with Copilot. It's like, do I need it on my taskbar to do that?
Well, how else are you going to get hallucinations when you search for your files?
This is where your file would be if you put it in the right place. This is where it would be.
Yeah, usually either find your files or you don't. But if you want your computer to lie to you about what files you have, you need AI for that. I think that this quote from Navyot Verk, Corporate VP of Windows Experiences, I think this quote kind of sums it up. This is all about us wanting to make sure that every user can get the superpowers of AI. Like, when you hear somebody talking like that, you know right off the bat, like, one hand on your wallet, back away slowly, like there's nothing good here. This is a grift. The superpowers of AI. Come on.
When they announce stuff like this, the likes of us, the Mastodon dwellers, the Linux users, in Alan's case, the FreeBSD users, we look at it and go, ugh, I don't want that. But do normal people want this?
Yes. Normal people absolutely want the idea of like, I can just tell my computer to do a thing and then it will go and do it.
Right. So we are weird then.
Yes and no. The thing is, if that were actually what we got, I think all three of us would be on board as well. If it was a situation of like, oh, we're going to turn your Windows 11 computer into Scarlett Johansson in the movie Her, an actually human-level capable agent that is reliable, that you can trust to go do things for you, I think the three of us would be putting that to pretty quick use as well. The difference is that we know that that's not a thing.
Well, yes, we do know that that's not a thing, but also I wouldn't use it on ethical grounds because of how it's been trained, the environmental stuff, just all of the arguments against this. The fact that it's not that good isn't even that relevant to me.
It's quite relevant to me. I mean, the ethical stuff is as well, but in my experience, when you have two arguments against using something and one of them is practical and the other is ethical, you keep that ethical one in your back pocket because it's going to be by far the less effective one when it comes to convincing people.
We've talked before about how newer generation of kids don't know what a file system is, and they don't save files in folders, they save them in apps. And now they're going to not even do that. They're just going to ask the computer, where did I put this? But the thing I wonder about is the way the human brain works. If it turns out you don't need to remember how to do something or remember certain information, you tend to not do that anymore. Back in the day, everybody remembered the phone numbers of a bunch of their friends, but now they're just in the phone. I barely know my own phone number. And so, it's something my brain has learned to offload to the computer, is remembering everybody's phone numbers. And as we get further and further into this, what other things are we going to end up offloading that maybe we shouldn't have? But the other thing is, AI is a tool. And like every tool, if you're good at using it, you can get really good results. But if you're bad at using it, you can just put holes in the wall. And part of it, I fear the way that Microsoft is introducing this and pushing this is they're not really setting up in a way where someone can get good at using this agent to do research. It is going to be teenagers trying to avoid doing their homework, not learning how to use these tools to actually get more done faster, to actually get the superpower that AI provides.
There is no superpower.
Exactly. There's no superpower. But if there was, it would be like in the movie when the person gets a superpower at first and ends up breaking a bunch of shit because they haven't learned how to use it yet. And I'm afraid that we're in for a lot of burnt toast and just people breaking things because they're using this tool that they don't really understand.
Well, and also we've talked about the security implications of using this stuff. And even Microsoft is admitting it. They admit that hallucinations are a problem and prompt injections are a potential serious problem. When you give an AI agent this much power over your computer, you're just setting yourself up for a security nightmare.
Well, especially if you remember back to the whole Windows recall or whatever, where it's going to be able to look at what was on your screen just before you asked the question.
Yeah. I just feel like I'm being left behind in a good way, I suppose. I feel like a proper Luddite here. I just want nothing to do with any of this. And yet I see normal people just going all in on it.
Again, I think a lot of that is that normal people don't actually understand the limitations. They have bought into a ridiculous bill of goods, an idea that AI is far more capable than it is, and in many cases even can be. And that informs a lot of this. A lot else of what informs this is, generally speaking, people want to use smart tools, let's say, for things that they don't really know how to do all that well. And people who are expert at something usually want a lot less handholding. Like when I watch, motorcycle YouTube, the experienced dirt bikers are all just absolutely cussing if they wind up on a bike that's got ABS and traction control turned on. Like the first thing they're doing is trying to turn that stuff off because they know how to use the lack of traction. They know how to use the exact full fine-grained control they can get out of the bike. So they don't want the hand-holding. Whereas to a normal person, that hand-holding is very attractive. And I think we're seeing some of this same effect here in normal people want AI, but Joe and Jim and Alan absolutely don't. Well, we've invested an awful lot of time in getting good with these systems that normal people are looking for AI to abstract away for them.
Yeah, like my friend who does sound for TV and movies and stuff, he occasionally has to do podcasts and he hates doing it. And there are AI tools that will cut out all the ums and ahs for you, all the awkward pauses, like all the stuff that I do manually. And I could use those tools, but A, the ethics of it, and B, it's not going to be as good as me. So I'm just not going to do it. Whereas he's under time pressure. He's got to basically shit these episodes out as quickly as possible. And so he just uses those tools to make his job easier because it's not a labor of love for him, I guess. Another interesting aspect of this is that right now you can turn it all off. And that's what Microsoft is saying. And like, it's up to the system administrators, the people taking care of fleets of Windows machines to decide whether this is going to be enabled. But if they really are turning it into an agentic OS, do we believe that you'll be able to turn it off forever? Or will it just become default at some point and you just won't be able to turn it off?
I don't think anybody with any sense whatsoever in 2025 believes any large company that says, oh no, it's cool, you can disable this AI feature if you don't want it. I mean, we've seen all of the big companies play some really shitty little tricks with going and turning things back on after you disable them. I mean, I think about all the times I tried to turn off, the keyword activation for the company whose name begins with a G, who, manages my phone. I have turned off the mic on my phone so many times in so many different ways to keep it from listening. But every few weeks, Big G finds a way to turn that back on again. And I discover that when somebody says, hey, and the G word, and my phone goes bloop, bloop, and starts listening. Or I just look down and see my phone's telling me what song is playing in the background. I'm like, damn it. My car re-enabled its AI, crash avoiding bullshit and almost killed me doing that. Google keeps re-enabling the mic on my phone. The mics on my Google smart speakers, those things are always lit up just the angriest orange because I have the hardware switch for the mic disabled and they don't like it. And every once in a while, in addition to the super angry orange light that's on 24/7, they will just tell me by voice that the mic is disabled and they sound very upset about it when they do.
Who remembers back in the early days of this show when we talked about Western Digital and their SMR drives, the shingled magnetic recording, and how there were controversies about that? Well, here we are a few years later, and there's a fresh controversy. The failure rates are higher than they probably should be.
The other thing that's worth realizing here is that when we talk about the failure rates being higher than they should be, we're not talking about all SMR drives. We're not even talking about all Western Digital SMR drives. We're talking about the little bitty Western Digital drives that really never should have been built SMR anyway, because it's like, who are you saving money for by making a 6 terabyte drive or a 4 terabyte drive SMR? There's not that much savings to be realized there. And those are the drives, the 2, the 4, the 6 terabyte SMR drives that Western Digital built that are failing left and right. And it seems to be more of just a general QA problem. They made small, cheap, crappy drives that fail a lot. They also happen to be SMR.
Yeah, so specifically the models that end in EZAZ, EDAZ, and EFAX. Data recovery companies report getting a disproportionate number of those drives in for data recovery and often not being able to get much out of them. And it turns out, it seems the SMR-ness is causing the problem. And yeah, it never made sense for these drives. Like, having talked to some of these drive manufacturers more recently, most of the time with SMR right now, you're looking at getting an extra 2 to 6 terabytes on a 30 terabyte drive as the advantage of using SMR. It's like, by going to SMR, you go from 30 to 34 terabytes. But why you would then apply that to a 4 terabyte drive where you would get less than half a terabyte of additional space out of going SMR? It doesn't seem worth the trade-off for all the extra complexity and the chance that it would break. And oh, look, it broke.
And all the SMR doesn't seem particularly relevant to the failure rates because the larger Western Digital SMR drives are not failing at higher rates than expected. Even though it doesn't seem relevant to the higher failure rate, it is absolutely relevant to a worse experience trying to get data back off of a failed drive from, like a Drive Savers or a Gilware or what have you, because SMR is essentially a technology to be able to cram data in more densely onto, the same physical amount of media. Therefore, yes, even under the best possible situations, it's going to be more difficult to recover data from forensically.
And doesn't it make sense that SMR drives would wear out more quickly because they're just doing more work, right? They're having to constantly rewrite sectors.
It depends. If you're using the SMR drive the way it was designed, then you're not constantly read, modifying, writing random sectors in place. But obviously these drives were not sold for SMR-friendly use cases. They were sold as Western Digital Blue cheap hard drives to throw in cheap desktop PCs.
And a desktop workload is one of the worst that you can have on an SMR drive versus just an archive where you're just dumping massive files one after another. That makes more sense for an SMR, but not a desktop, right? Because you're having to read and write all the time.
Yes, but at this point, I would argue that desktop is the worst possible use case for a Rust drive, period.
Yeah.
SMR or not. I mean, it's just the idea of a desktop Rust hard drive in 2025 is just insane. That's not a thing. Rust drives are for bulk storage now. That's what they're for. There's not really a use case for lightweight desktop Rust hard drives.
What'll be interesting is to see if this results in a second class action lawsuit about these particular set of drives. The previous one was settled for $2.7 million to a compensation fund. All of that resulted in $4 to $7 per person who got scammed and buying one of these drives. Now, the drive failing as opposed to just not necessarily performing as well as it should, I would expect a slightly better compensation, but it was a 2 or 3 terabyte hard drive and they're getting 3, 4, 5 years old now. So I wouldn't expect much.
I think I got $3 from my 4 terabyte red that I bought just so I could test it for Ars Technica back in the day.
Let's do some free consulting then. But first, just a quick thank you to everyone who supports us with PayPal and Patreon. We really do appreciate that. If you want to join those people, you can go to 2.5admins.com/support. And remember that for various amounts on Patreon, you can get an advert-free RSS feed of either just this show or all the shows in the Late Night Linux family. And if you want to send in your questions for Jim and Alan or your feedback, you can email show@2.5admins.com. Another perk of being a patron is you get to skip the queue, which is what Stephen has done. I do contract work for an organization that demands a tightly controlled tech stack. My team needs to put together a backup solution for NetApp. It needs to be vSAN and NetApp compatible. The users are not willing to learn new things. You've converted me to the world of ZFS, but is there a ZFS compatible solution you have experience with that will work in my environment?
Yeah, there's a couple of different options here. The one that I've dealt with mostly over the last 5 or so years is Veeam. Very popular when combined with VMware and vSAN and so on. Can basically work from snapshots of the VMs and back them up to a target, which in this case could be ZFS, and works very well there. And as of the newer versions, Veeam can take advantage of ZFS's BRT, or block reference tree, the file cloning feature, to do its synthetic full backups and so on. So if you are exposing the storage to Veeam over SMB or NFS, then it can actually do the server-side copying in order to speed up the backups as well.
That's Veeam, Veeam. Not the most intuitive spelling, but good for SEO.
Correct. And for those of you who are wondering, Veeam is pretty solid replication. Folks who are big into the VMware world typically think that Veeam is just the most amazing thing ever. Personally, I find it to be a distinct second to ZFS replication, but it does work well enough for the job. It is not free as in beer, let alone free as in speech. However, when you're in one of these environments where you've got a big expensive tech stack and you're looking to just replace little pieces of it at a time, and discombobulating your users is a bigger problem than spending some money, yeah, just continue to use Veeam, but use it with ZFS file systems as a target. As far as vSAN compatibility goes, there are a lot of different things that you might mean by that. And one of the things that you can do with ZFS is you can create a ZVol, you can target iSCSI to that, and you can ingest that ZVol into a vSAN environment that way, if that's the kind of vSAN compatibility that you're looking for.
Yeah, and since your source in this case is NetApp, obviously you can't do ZFS replication, but you can do a bunch of different things. And Veeam's not the only option. There are other things you can do. Bacula also has support for ZFS on its side. So if you are looking for something free as in beer and speech, that is an option as well. But mostly, you need to take snapshots of the VMware VMs and export them off to ZFS somehow, either with your own thing, with something like Bacula or something like Veeam. It really comes down to how much you want to be involved in the process. And since it's a backup, you probably want it as automated as possible. And since your source is NetApp, your options are maybe a little more limited, but you can definitely get ZFS in the mix there.
Yeah, and essentially, since this is a VMware environment and we're not talking about migrating out of a VMware environment, using Veeam is just the no-brainer. It's what everybody in that environment expects to find, expects to use. There are no raised eyebrows there, so it's going to cause you a lot less friction. Now, if you were looking to redesign the entire environment, then we would be talking about ripping out VMware entirely. No more vSphere, no more Veeam, just setting up, KVM or possibly Beehive, for your virtualization on the back end with ZFS as storage and just using replication. And you can do all those things, and it's wonderful, and it performs great, and it's easy to maintain. However, when what you have is an existing team that does not want to learn new things and just wants to use VMware, just target Veeam to a ZFS target is the answer you're looking for.
Johannes writes, I have 2 different Wi-Fi SSIDs on my home network, each mapped to a different VLAN. The more trusted VLAN has my FreeBSD server and 3 desktop PCs. The other VLAN is used for game consoles, phones, and so forth. This means I need to use smart switches and access points which understand VLANs. I'm thinking about collapsing everything into a single network segment and installing WireGuard on all PCs instead. Then I could route trusted traffic over the WireGuard network. Does this seem like a good idea in terms of both security and maintainability?
Well, there are a couple of pieces that are kind of left out there. One is that if you collapse everything into one physical network segment, but then you set up a software-defined network using WireGuard on top of that, well, that's only going to do you any good if you set up firewall rules on all of those PCs that basically tell them to ignore everything incoming that is not WireGuard traffic. Of course, that's pretty simple to do, and that's not something that, Windows updates or, FreeBSD updates or anybody else's updates are going to undo for you. So I think that probably is a pretty good idea moving forward. I think that's pretty portable. It means that if you want to, you have the option of setting up, phones, tablets, and whatnot also on your trusted network, or you can leave them on the untrusted segment.
I don't know if WireGuard is maybe the best choice there, since it's a point-to-point network. And so you would have to have each PC have its own connection to each other. Like each of those PCs would have its own WireGuard back to the FreeBSD. But what if a PC wants to talk to another PC? Do you want the traffic to go through the FreeBSD machine and then to the second PC? Or do you want the PCs to be able to talk to each other directly? In which case, the WireGuard client on each PC is going to have an endpoint to every other machine on the network, not just the FreeBSD machine.
If you actually need a direct point-to-point between any 2 arbitrary machines, but the question is, do you really? How frequently do you actually have arbitrary machines talk directly to one another rather than having arbitrary machines talk to the FreeBSD server? I know in most of the networks I run, it really wouldn't be that big of a deal to just have the server be, a WireGuard hub and have all of the individual PCs connect directly to it, because that's almost always what the traffic is really going to look like anyway. It's going to be a PC talking to that server. The only difference would be getting out, to the internet, but you don't really need to go out through the server for that either, because all that will still go out over your untrusted network.
Yeah, and kind of to that point, it may actually be what you want, where trusted machine A can't talk directly to trusted machine B, except for going through FreeBSD, where maybe you have firewall rules to decide how much traffic can go through there. Or, you're enforcing that they're definitely on the trusted network.
Alan hit the nail on the head. That is your biggest concern. If you are concerned with the ability to have arbitrary ad hoc connections directly between every individual machine, then you probably don't want something like WireGuard. You probably want to stick with your VLAN approach if that's what you're looking for. But if that's not particularly important to you, and I would advise you to think really hard because it probably isn't, then the WireGuard approach is really, it's a nice one. It allows you to avoid needing extra special fancy hardware. I think it's going to be a little bit easier conceptually just to kind of keep in your head and, maintain going forward. And also there's less to break in really unpleasant ways if you lose a piece of hardware. When you've got everything set up dependent on mapping VLANs to SSIDs, if you lose one of your smart switches, well, you can't just replace it and that's it. You have to replace it and you have to reprogram the new switch. You have to get everything all set back up to work all over again. Whereas with your WireGuard approach, you don't need anything special. You don't need smart switches. You don't need any special configuration. Your machines know what they need to know, and there's nothing else you need.
Yeah, like when one of my switches died because lightning came in over the cable coax and went through the modem and zorched the switch, it meant I couldn't just grab a cheap switch and replace it, at least temporarily, because I depended on the VLAN. So I had to wait for a replacement for the proper smart switch. And, even if you do need that more arbitrary connection thing, it doesn't mean don't do this VPN setup. It just means maybe WireGuard's not the right VPN software, or something that does a mesh is more the VPN you're looking for. But to Jim's point, I think WireGuard is probably the easy thing here. And, having everything just dial back to the FreeBSD machine and have it routed that way. That's how my management network at my house works. And it extends off to a data center. My one machine here can reach the management network at a data center. And this way, any machine that's VPN to my FreeBSD machine at home can then also VPN to the data center.
You do also have the ability, should you need it, you can set something up where, let's say that for whatever reason, maybe you need a relatively dumb device on the trusted network, something like a printer that you can install WireGuard on. You can always set up a second network interface on your FreeBSD machine and plug that into a simple dumb switch, plug your dumb devices into that switch, and you can have that network be reachable from the WireGuard network, but not from the main flat network out there. So you have a lot of ways to customize this. From a security standpoint, I think it's actually superior to the VLAN approach because it's a little harder to accidentally give useful access to untrusted devices this way, because the traffic is not just artificially kind of segmented away, it's actually encrypted. So even if a device manages to listen into the traffic, it doesn't do it any good because it's encrypted. There's nothing useful you can do with it.
Yeah, and I even went so far as, as I'm about to be in the middle of moving house, created a WireGuard VPN between my two houses over the internet, even though it's only a couple of blocks away, so that I can access the trusted machines on the opposite side of wherever I am. At the new place, I can still stream Plex or whatever off my home network, but over the LAN, not over the internet. Or I can manage the Wi-Fi with my Omada controller from the other house.
Right, well, we'd better get out of here then. Remember, show at 2.5admins.com if you want to send any questions or your feedback. You can find me at joelrest.com/mastodon.
You can find me at mercenariesysadmin.com.
And I'm at Alan Jude.
We'll see you next week.